Hello friends, in this video I will explain you how you should go about answering and acing a guesstimate or a market sizing question. Now what is a guesstimate or a market sizing question? It is a question where you are required to estimate the market size of a particular business or a particular product with limited information. You need to have some skill in mathematics, logic, problem solving, and some background information about business. So in this video, I will address what is a guesstimate question, why is the interviewer asking you the guesstimate question, what are some of the tips that you can make use of when you're answering the guesstimate question, the steps that you need to follow in order to answer the guesstimate question, and lastly, I will share with you some examples of guesstimate questions so you have understanding of the flow that you need to take when answering the guesstimate question. Now, examples of guesstimate questions could be how many trucks are sold in a particular market, how many, let's say, lemonade stands are there on a particular street, how many taxi or Uber drivers are there in a particular city, and so on and so forth. These questions are very much common in consulting interviews. However, they are becoming more and more famous and regular in other business interviews as well. So while there may not be a full-fledged interview around guesstimate questions, however, one or two guesstimate questions might pop up in other interviews as well. So it is good to have some understanding and some knowledge on how to go about solving a guesstimate question. Now, before moving forward, one call out. In case you find any value in this video, please do press the like button as it keeps me motivated. Second, also subscribe to the channel so you get notified as soon as I publish a content, because on this channel I put video with regards to career success and financial success for early and mid-career professionals. So I'm sure this channel would be very beneficial for someone like you. So please like and subscribe. Now let's keep rolling into the video. Now, the reason the interviewer is asking you these questions is because they want to discover the applicant's ability in mathematics, logic, problem solving, and their business understanding. Now here, let me share with you some tips that you need to keep in regard when you're going in an interview where you expect to be asked guesstimate questions. Number one, and very important, is to take your time. You don't get points for speed. Rather, you get points for a good and a quality answer. And a good and quality answer is only possible when you take time, you structure your thoughts, you think about it, and only then speak. If you start speaking without putting the entire structure together in your mind, you may start to falter at some point in time. So it is best that you take 2 to 3 minutes of time and even request the interviewer to give you that time so you can put your thoughts together before going to answer this question. Now, number two tip is, in order to structure your thoughts, it is best to write them down, because as you write them down, it clarifies your thinking and it puts a structure to how you want to address the question. So it is best to write down the flow in which you want to address and you want to answer the question, and put it down together, put any numbers or calculations that you need to do, run them and write them down before you go ahead and answer them. This way it will serve two purposes. One, it will clarify your thought, and second, it will provide you a cheat sheet which you can refer to anytime you are flowing from one information to the next, because you've captured all of it now on a piece of paper. So you don't need to work through your memory. Rather, you have the entire flow in front of you written down. Next is understand that there is no correct answer. So much so that even the interviewer may not have the full or precise answer. So all you need to work on is the flow and the logic. Don't try to be accurate, don't try to be precise, rather work on the flow or the approach in which you will calculate and do the working with which you reach the ultimate answer. Now, the ultimate answer can be way off than the actual estimate, but as long as your logic was the right logic and it had the right flow, your answer is the correct answer. And hence, make sure that you don't treat a guesstimate question as a mathematical question. Rather, you should treat it as a logical question, where you need to communicate to the interviewer why you chose certain options or certain steps in the way you approach the question and the way you move from point A to point B. So the approach you take towards answering these questions and every step you take after the previous step should lead you towards the end answer. That is all you need to do. You need to find that flow. Don't try to find the accurate or the correct answer, rather try to find the accurate or the correct flow. Now, similarly, as I said, since it is not a mathematical question, avoid going into complex calculations and difficult mathematics. What I mean is, let's take an example. 0.75% of 2.5 million is harder to calculate mentally versus 10% of 2 million. So most probably you won't be given any numbers by the interviewer. He or she will just ask you to estimate the size of a particular business or market, and will allow you to use your own numbers. Since you have the privilege to use your own numbers, use easy numbers. 10% of 2 million is an easy number versus 0.75% of 2.5 million. Now on the same lines, also make use of rounding. Wherever you end up with a fraction or decimal, just round up or round down the calculation or that number, so you can easily use that number in future calculations of your flow. So as you're flowing from point A to point B and you create any numbers which end up being a fraction or decimal, just round them up so you can easily use the rounded numbers in future calculation. Because if you continue to use a decimal number in future calculation, it will become harder and harder, and the decimal numbers will continue to become bigger and bigger. So avoid all that complexity. Again, as I said, you need to focus on your logic as against focusing on the mathematics. Now let me talk about the steps that you need to take in the interview as you are answering the guesstimate question. Number one is to ask all clarifying questions that you need to ask before you even put pencil or your thoughts to answer the question. It is important you have complete understanding of the situation, the question, and have a complete grasp on what is being asked before you try to even formulate an answer. Number two is, as you think of the answer, think of it in smaller chunks and smaller pieces. As you take the interviewer through the flow, you take the interviewer from one piece to the next piece, to the next piece, and so on and so forth. So each piece will fit into that flow. So think and answer in those small pieces. Now for these pieces, it is best to think of it as a funnel. So you start broad. Let's say you start with overall population of a market. Then you go into demographics, whether it's male or female. So you say, okay, population 1, then narrow it down to female, narrow it down to college educated female, further narrow it down to female who are college educated and are earning more than $100,000. So this way you are moving from a broader funnel into a narrow funnel and eventually coming to your answer. This funnel also creates a flow. You start broad, and as you narrow down, you create a flow from each of the smaller steps or smaller chunks, and then you eventually come to your ultimate answer. Next is, as I talked, you put this flow together on a piece of paper and then start adding numbers to it. So let's say you start with the population size is 1 million, so you write 1 million against it. Then you say next assumption is female population is 50%, so it's 500,000 of female population. The population which is female and college educated is 10% of that 500,000, and so on and so forth. Again, remember, use easy numbers so the calculation is easy, and start putting the numbers against the flow that you've created. Now, once you have your funnel and numbers together, the last piece is communication. So start the communication with the top of the funnel and take the interviewer through the flow of the logic that you've used. Make sure at each step you make the interviewer agree to where you're going. Let them nod so you can move from one step to next step. This is just to make sure that the interviewer is following you. The last thing you want is you go in a rush through your flow and the interview didn't follow you. And given they couldn't follow you in the beginning, they may try to hold on to their questions and hope that you would say something which eventually they would understand. And by the time you've reached the end of the funnel, they didn't grasp anything because they're still at the top of the funnel. And now they look too dumb to ask you any question. And the easy way out for them is just to say that they didn't understand or you were not good enough to explain or your answer was completely wrong. Even though your answer was good, it's just that they didn't get it. So make sure they are nodding, they accept the flow, they agree with the flow, and then keep taking them from one place to another. Probably they will have questions as you go from one flow to the other, but thankfully you have everything written down, you have the numbers in front of you. You can always explain and use those numbers to elaborate the point that you were making and share your logic why you used a particular option over the other. So now let me take you through one example question so you have some understanding on how to use the funnel approach. Let's say the question is, estimate the size of iPhone users in United Kingdom. Now you can start by saying the population of United Kingdom you assume to be 50 million. Now it's not 50 million, it's higher than that. It's somewhere around 67, 75 million. However, as I said, keep the numbers very easy. So even if you know the exact or the right number, use 50 million and assume rather dumb that you don't know the exact population of UK. You won't be scored on that, by the way. So you use 50 million. Then you say, okay, there are elderly and children which you can take out because from that population, they are not potential iPhone users. So that leaves you, let's say, with 50% of the population, assuming that the 25% is kids and 25% are elderly who are not into iPhone usage or smartphone usage. Only 50% of the population is into smartphone usage. So 50% of 50 million is 25 million. Again, an easy calculation. Then you say, okay, we take out the people who are below lower income. So lower income could be anything, let's say 50,000 pounds or 40,000 pounds per year. And you can say, let's assume that the population which is below this income level, because they might not be able to afford iPhone, is 50%. So 50% of the population is above it, which is able to afford iPhone. So you take 50% of 25 million, which is 12.5 million. Now, again, if you continue to take this 50% again and again, the interviewer may not like it, because now you are making it very easy. So you'll have to play with some different numbers, but easy numbers. So the next number is a different number, but an easy one, which is, you can say, I read somewhere that the iPhone market globally is around 20% of market share of all smartphone usage. So assuming there are 12.5 million people who can afford a smartphone, so 20% of that 12.5 million is what is the iPhone market in UK. And again, here I use 20% instead of using 50%. 20% is more realistic. And then you use 20% of 12.5 million in order to reach the number of iPhone users in United Kingdom. Now let's take one more example for the sake of this video. However, I will create a separate video where I will cover 5 to 8 examples just for practice run. But let me take one more example here for the sake of this video. Let's say the question is, how many cups of coffee are sold in United States? Again, we start with the total population. So the total population is 300 million. Let's assume 20% of 300 million is kids. So we are left with around 240 million people who are potential coffee consumers. Now here you might want to break the population segment into, let's say, 4 parts. Habitual coffee drinkers, regular coffee drinkers, occasional coffee drinkers, and non-drinkers. And then you give different percentages to each. And here for each of the segment, you have to determine how many cups of coffee do they consume every day. So the habitual users, let's say you will pick up 3. Regular users would be 2. Occasional users would be 1 cup of coffee per day. And then non-users are 0 cups. And then use that population that you came out with, multiply it with the percentage, multiply it with the number of cups, and then calculate for each segment how many cups do they consume per day. And then when you add it all together, you get the number. Now again, it is easy if you put it all together on the paper, but make sure you bring some logic to it, which is habitual users, regular users, non-users, and so on and so forth. This all gives a sense to the interviewer that you have some business understanding, versus just saying population size, percentage of coffee consumers, which is 50%, 50% of population is what the coffee consumption is. You have to put some science or logic to the way or the flow that you're taking, so that the interviewer understands that you also understand the business dynamics, versus just doing mathematics. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you found value in this video. And in case you did, I am sure you would also find value in another video that I created on how you should go about tackling a situation when you don't have an answer to an interview question. So here's the link. Secondly, I also created another video on how you should go about introducing yourself in an interview, which is one of the most underprepared questions. Here's the link for that video. Thank you.